I was sitting on the cold tile of the hospital bathroom floor when I got the text that shattered what I thought was already broken beyond repair. She tried to take her life again. They're not sure if she'll make it this time. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I remember the sound, like glass cracking from the inside out. It echoed in my chest. That night I wasn't supposed to be there. I had taken a shift for someone else on a whim, needing the distraction. I didn't expect to find my sister's best friend, Maya, bleeding out in the trauma bay 2 floors below. And I sure as hell didn't expect to feel the hot flood of something like guilt, or something much, much heavier. Because I hadn't spoken to Maya in over 2 years, not since we screamed at each other in my sister's driveway during a fight that wasn't really about what we said it was. And yet here she was, hanging between life and death, and all I could think was how badly I needed her to live, not just for my sister, but for reasons I didn't want to name yet. Not even to myself. Back then, Maya was wildfire, sharp-witted, loud laughing, tattooed to the tips of her fingers with art she swore meant nothing and everything all at once. We used to talk for hours in the basement of my parents' house, a tangle of late-night philosophy and cheap wine stolen from the liquor cabinet, conversations that bled into sunrise. But something had shifted, something I didn't want to name. One night she touched my wrist mid-laugh and it felt like being struck by lightning. I pulled away like I was burned and neither of us ever brought it up again. After that, the late-night talks stopped. She started dating guys with cigarette habits and band t-shirts, and I threw myself into school, pretending I wasn't always half looking for her in every crowd. So to see her name on that hospital roster, surrounded by vitals dropping off the screen, Maya C. Female 26 overdose, code gray, was like getting sucker punched by the past, with a side of reality I wasn't ready to face. The twist: my sister didn't even know I was at the hospital that night. And when she called me sobbing about Maya a few hours later, I lied. I told her I was asleep. I said I'd just found out. Because what I couldn't say, not then, maybe not ever, was that I stood outside Maya's hospital room for 32 minutes before walking in. And in those 32 minutes, I felt every reason I had to stay buried start clawing their way to the surface. I couldn't shake the memory of one of our last conversations, her voice quiet, eyes glazed with something like heartbreak. "You don't get it, do you? You keep pretending you're just listening to me, but we're both feeling the same damn thing." I denied it then, laughed it off. But now, years later, watching her fight to breathe on a ventilator, I couldn't pretend anymore. The first time I saw Maya after the incident, she was a ghost. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, the faintest hint of bruising along her jaw from the fall she'd taken before the overdose, and her body was hooked up to machines that did all the breathing for her. I stood at the foot of her bed, too scared to approach, too scared to turn around and walk out of that sterile room. She looked so small, so fragile, and yet I couldn't shake the memory of the woman who had once stood in front of me, towering with confidence, daring the world to dare her. That night felt like an eternity ago, yet I still couldn't escape the way it felt to be near her, the way it had felt to want something I didn't understand. It felt absurd. But when I pulled the chair closer, sat beside her, I was flooded with something deeper than grief, deeper than guilt. Something more like a wild hunger, a pain so ancient that it was almost comforting. The thought that maybe she hadn't chosen to die because of me, that she hadn't been torn apart by me, became the thing that kept me awake in the nights leading up to this moment. But there I was, with her, and I couldn't make sense of it. The days dragged into weeks, each one longer than the last, as Maya fought her way back from the brink. And we began to talk. Slowly at first, whispers in the quiet hours of the morning when the world was asleep and the hospital was still. Her voice was hoarse from the breathing tube, but there was a weight to her words that felt heavier than anything we had ever shared before. I asked her if she remembered the time we spent together when we were younger, and she nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I remember everything," she said. "Every word, every laugh, every argument." She paused, her breath shaky. "I don't remember why we stopped talking, but I remember everything else." It struck me like a punch to the gut. How could I explain that I had stopped talking to her because I was afraid of what we were becoming in those late-night talks? I couldn't put those emotions into words, not then, not now. What if she had known? What if she'd felt the same and I was the one who ran? My thoughts tumbled over themselves, but I knew one thing for sure. If I didn't admit to myself what this was, what we were, I would never forgive myself. She stared at me with those eyes that always seemed to see right through me, and I could feel it. The shift, the moment we both realized that something had changed, something we couldn't ignore. That unspoken understanding hung between us like a thick fog, and when she whispered, "I'm so sorry," I felt my chest tighten in response. Sorry for what? My mind raced, but the only thing I could think to say was, "No, I'm sorry, I should have been there." But the words felt insufficient. They always did. How could I apologize for something so big, for an absence that stretched years, for the love I had buried because it felt like something wrong, something that didn't make sense in a world that already made so little sense? But the truth was, every apology we exchanged, every quiet moment in that sterile hospital room was a step closer to something we couldn't take back, something neither of us could pretend we didn't feel. By the third week, Maya was awake enough to leave the ICU. Her body was still weak, but her eyes, those eyes, had regained some of their old fire, the one that used to flicker across every corner of the room whenever she stepped into it. I could see it in the way she looked at me now, like she was trying to piece together the fragments of us, of what had been lost, of what had never really gone away. But neither of us spoke of it directly. Not yet. The nurses came in and out, her mother visited, and I pretended to be just a part of the routine, a friend, a quiet presence. But Maya and I both knew the truth now. We had been orbiting each other for years, dancing around the pull of something neither of us understood but couldn't escape. And with every day that passed, the tension between us grew, thickening in the silence, in the moments when we didn't speak, when we simply existed together. But Maya was a different person now. The girl who once laughed at the universe's absurdities, the one who was always pushing boundaries and breaking rules, was no longer the same. There was something fragile about her now, something that made me want to protect her even more fiercely, even as I knew that maybe for the first time I was the one who needed saving. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the hospital room in shades of red and gold, Maya broke the silence. Do you ever think about what we could have been? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the words cut through me like shards of glass. She was staring out the window, her gaze fixed on something far beyond the sterile walls, far beyond the confines of this hospital room. It was the question that had haunted me for years, the question I had never dared ask aloud. What could we have been? What were we really? I thought about the way she had looked at me when we were younger, the electric tension that neither of us could name. I thought about the way she would touch my arm lightly when she spoke, as if she were trying to anchor herself to something or maybe trying to remind me that I existed in the space between her fingers. But then I thought about the pain that followed, the painful, jagged silence that had settled between us after I pulled away, after I ran. I've thought about it a lot, I finally said, my voice shaky. More than I care to admit. My words felt like a confession, and the weight of them pressed down on my chest. Maya turned to face me then, her eyes soft but steady. I thought about it too, she said quietly, her fingers brushing the edge of the sheets. And I think that's why I did it, why I ended up here. I tried to drown it out, but I couldn't, not anymore. Her admission hit me like a wave crashing over rocks, unexpected and relentless. The hurt that had lingered between us for so long, unspoken, unacknowledged, suddenly became something tangible, something raw and real. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that it wasn't too late, that we could still figure this out, but the words were stuck in my throat. Instead, I sat there, paralyzed by the weight of what we were both carrying, what we had been carrying all along. The silence stretched between us, but it was different now. It wasn't the same silence that had separated us before. It wasn't the quiet of avoidance or fear. It was a silence that was heavy with recognition, with the slow realization that everything we had been through had led to this moment. That maybe, just maybe, this was our second chance. The truth hung in the air, unspoken, but it was there, neither of us could deny it. We had always been here, tangled together in this unspoken thing. We just hadn't realized it until now. The weeks that followed blurred into something almost surreal, a delicate dance between distance and closeness. Maya slowly regained her strength, though it was clear that she wasn't the same person who had once stormed out of my life. Her laughter, once so full of defiance and fire, now had a quiet, aching quality to it, like something that had been cracked but never completely shattered. And we spoke more, not just about the past, but about everything. We shared secrets we hadn't even realized we were hiding, even as I fought to suppress the overwhelming urge to just reach out and kiss her, to erase the boundaries that had defined us for so long. The unspoken tension was always there, flickering just beneath the surface of our conversations, but it was more than just the remnants of what we had once been. It was something more fragile, more delicate, as if we were both afraid to speak the truth aloud and shatter whatever fragile balance we had managed to build. But every night, as the hospital emptied and the world grew quiet, I found myself sitting by her side, watching the shadows of the trees outside sway against the window. And every night, it felt as though we were inching closer to something neither of us could escape. One night after the sun had long since disappeared, Maya turned to me with an intensity I hadn't seen in her since that day in the basement, years ago. Her eyes, dark and searching, were locked on mine. I've been thinking, she said, her voice steady, but the vulnerability beneath it was unmistakable. About us, about everything. She hesitated, as if unsure how to continue, and I could feel it, the same thing that had always hung in the air between us, unspoken, impossible to ignore. My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic rhythm that felt like it would suffocate me if I didn't speak. Maya, you don't have to, I started, but she cut me off with a sharp shake of her head. No, she whispered, leaning in just enough that the air between us crackled with electricity. I have to say this, we can't pretend anymore. Her words hung in the space between us, heavy and loaded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I thought I could forget you, she continued, her voice raw with the truth I knew she had been hiding. I thought I could move on from everything that happened, from everything we were, but I can't. She exhaled slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. I never stopped loving you, and I think you know that too. The air seemed to freeze in that moment. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second I wasn't sure if I was breathing. She was right, I had always known. I had buried it deep, locked it away behind all the walls I had built between us. But now there was no escaping it. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I wanted to reach out to her to close the gap that had always separated us, but fear held me in place. Fear of what would happen once we crossed that line. But Maya's hand, trembling just slightly, reached for mine. It was the gentlest of touches, but it was enough. Her fingers brushed over mine, and I felt the warmth of her skin seep through the walls I'd built, felt the pulse of something undeniable, something that wasn't going to let me pretend any longer. Do you feel it too? She asked, her voice a soft plea, a whisper of everything we had been and everything we could still be. I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle into my bones. Yes, I had always felt it, and now, finally, I was ready to admit it. That night, everything changed. The walls I had built around my heart, the ones I'd spent years constructing out of fear and regret, came crashing down in the space between Maya's whispered confession and the raw vulnerability in her eyes. For the first time in years, I let myself believe in something I'd spent so long denying, something so powerful, so undeniable that I couldn't ignore it any longer. She hadn't just been a chapter in my past. Maya had been a part of me all along, a pulse that had never really stopped beating, even when I convinced myself it had. And now, as her fingers curled around mine, it felt like we were both stepping into a new world, one that we could shape together if we had the courage to face it. We were no longer two people pretending to be friends, to be strangers. We were two people who had been running from something far greater than ourselves, and now we were ready to stop running. It was strange how the years of silence and distance suddenly seemed irrelevant in the face of the truth we had both been avoiding. As Maya leaned in closer, I could feel the air around us shift, the tension between us fizzling with a charge that was years in the making. Her breath was warm against my cheek, and I could taste the vulnerability in the way her lips barely brushed against mine. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of quiet understanding of all the pain we'd shared, of the regrets we'd carried, and of the love that had never been extinguished, not by time, not by distance, not by silence. We didn't need to speak again. The kiss said it all. And in that single, soft moment, I felt like everything we had ever been, everything we could be, finally made sense. When we pulled away, neither of us spoke immediately. There was nothing more to say. The world outside the hospital room didn't matter anymore. There were no more questions, no more uncertainty, only the undeniable truth that we had been waiting for this moment all along, whether we knew it or not. Maya's eyes were soft, no longer filled with the shadows of her past. They were full of something new, hope maybe, or simply the freedom of letting go of all the fears that had once kept us apart. I squeezed her hand, the weight of everything unspoken between us finally lifting. I'm here, I whispered, my voice thick with all the emotions I'd never let myself feel. I'm here, Maya, for whatever comes next. Her smile was the kind of smile I'd only ever dreamed of, the one that promised that no matter what we had been through, we would always find our way back to each other. And in that moment, I realized that the love we had buried beneath layers of fear, shame, and regret wasn't something we could outrun. It had always been there, waiting for us to stop pretending. And now that we had finally acknowledged it, we couldn't ignore it. We didn't need to. Love, real, messy, complicated love, was what had kept us going. And it was only just beginning.